Good morning, everyone. Welcome to we don't have a name for it yet, so we'll call it the Keystone Barndominium Podcast for now. We have Dustin with us here. I'm Jim, by the way.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in construction and your experience, how many years, etc.?
So I am going on 33 years old, and I've been in construction since I've been about 14 years old, actually. And I've been here at Keystone this June. It'll be 5 years. So I've been doing sales for 5 years. Prior to that, I was actually present on a construction crew with me and my dad doing the work. So that's kind of my background. It ranges from working on poultry farms to building barndos to remodeling houses to doing tile showers, whatever you can think of construction wise. I've been sort of involved at some point or another.
Awesome. So a little bit about my background too, as far as construction. Had an 8th grade education, got out similar to what Dustin was saying, about 15. Started doing cabinets, did portable storage sheds, carports, modular homes, kind of you name it. I kind of piddled in it, did some roofing. And then I got into the barndominium / pole barn space about roughly 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. Really love it, have a passion for it, enjoy it most of the time. Just like anything, it has its ups and downs. So today I wanted to specifically talk about kind of stage one, if you will, on building a barndo, buying the land, what you should look for in land, and just kind of have a conversation around that. So do you kind of want to kick that off, Dustin, and your experience of selling for 5 years, building a couple houses of your own? What are some things to think about when building, site preparation, etc.?
So actually the one me and you went and looked at yesterday comes to mind. These people I've been talking to for several months now wanted us to come out and do a site visit to see where they want to put the house. And getting there, I noticed it's probably a tenth of a mile off the road, and it's extremely flat. And right away, I noticed it was really swampy ground. So my first thought was, this could be a problem with flooding and that kind of thing. So that's something to consider. Where you're sitting there up next to a creek, and they have really no waterways, and so we shot the grade, and we decided they need to, and their septic tank sits up about 2 feet above the general lay of the land as well. So we decided we need to build their pad up in order to mitigate those water issues. So that's one thing I always think of is with these post frame houses, they don't have crawl spaces, and so the subfloor doesn't sit up 2 feet or so. So you have to make sure you mitigate your water problems when you do that, because if you got any water flow towards your home, you're going to have it on your floor.
Yep. So that's something I want to just interject real quick. So people think about crawl spaces, well, we're going to build up so we don't need to worry about it. So I bought a house and they didn't do it. So now my crawl space is wet all the time. So either way, you always got to think about how am I getting my water away from either your slab or your crawl space. You got to have a plan to get your water away, or you will have a nightmare on your hands.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. If you don't do something about your water with a crawl space, then you're going to have mold and you're going to have problems down the road. So it's the same thing. It's just most people would rather have water in their crawl space versus in their actual house. So
fair enough. Yeah, I just thought of that, but yeah. So that swampy land, we're going to build that one up 3 feet. We're bringing in 3 feet of clay, so that's something to think about when building a barndominium. You have to have a level pad, and a lot of people don't realize that. It's not like a crawl space where you start with 3 courses of block and go to 9 courses if you need to. You have to, generally speaking, bring a dozer in and do some site prep on these barndominiums.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The other thing I was thinking of is you're talking about a level pad. Something that I see a lot is I'll have customers say, "Oh yeah, come out and look at it, but it's pretty much flat." And there's a big difference between a flat pad and a level pad. So it could be flat and on a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
And so that's also something I always think about driving up to a site is if they've told me it's flat, that's kind of a red flag almost, because a lot of times people don't realize how far off level it is.
Well, to the eye, it's very deceiving. So we've both been in this business for 15, 16 years, we understand. But to the non-builders, they can look at a 100-foot long pad, for example, and to them it looks like it's a foot off. In reality, it's 7, 8, 9 feet. It's very much an optical illusion when you're just looking at it.
Yeah, just like that one yesterday, you wouldn't have thought it's 3 feet off level by just standing there. So
yeah,
that's a good point.
Do you want to talk a little bit about running utilities, like how far you build off the road, running utilities, so on and so forth, perk test?
Oh, yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. So that's another thing I was just thinking of while you were talking there about power lines even. When you drive up to a site, you can't build underneath power lines. If they're the really big power lines, there's usually a 75-foot setback. Running water to the house is always something to think about. Some people dig wells, which ends up being anywhere from a $15,000 to $30,000 expense, and so that's not always a viable option. What direction are you exactly thinking of as far as speaking to the utilities, as far as our part in that, or?
No, just so real quick, a lot of our customers that we deal with every day are acting as their own general contractor. We dry the shell in, do the concrete, the exterior is complete, and it's ready for plumbing, electrical, HVAC, etc. And just kind of talk them through, like, the farther you build off the road, how it affects your cost overall, and running underground electric and water.
Yeah, so most places with water lines, you're pretty much responsible typically to run your own supply line from the meter. And so in my case, that was a quarter of a mile and ended up costing me about $4,000. So that's always something to talk about. As far as electrical, most electric companies have a minimum amount that they will pay for, and usually it's about like $100 a foot or something after that. And so, if you're a mile or so off the road, that can get really expensive if you don't have good access to electrical.
I don't think it's quite 100 most places, but it's up there. It's pretty pricey.
Maybe it's $10, and I'm thinking if you're 1,000 foot, because
I don't know the exact number, but I know different power companies have, like, I went and talked to a guy last week, and he said the first 1,000 foot of overhead was free, and then everything after that was on him. And I think he said he was looking at like $20 a foot.
Yeah, 100's way too much. That would get astronomical. But I remember.
But still, at $20 a foot, if say you got to run 1,000 foot of underground, you do the math. It's really expensive, really quick.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So yeah, just want to talk a little bit about too, like when you buy a wooded lot. To some people, when they're out looking for land, that either some people get it and they don't care, but some people that's very intimidating to buy a fully wooded lot. How do we go about building there? We do a lot of that, especially in Tennessee. Seems that people can buy land cheaper. I don't know if you remember that one in Stewart we did that you sold.
Mm-hmm.
Going in and clearing that land is something we do and we're experts at. So if you are looking at buying a wooded lot, we would love to come out and kind of talk you through what that looks like and how we can put your driveway in and build your pad, etc. You want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, so like you said, we do a lot of those in Stewart County, and that one specifically down that I remember with. Shouldn't say his name on airwaves. But I remember, that one there was it looked really intimidating. There was some swamp issues. There was a lot of trees. It was kind of built into a hill, but the cost was actually not that bad. Not really, considering it wasn't any more than a typical lot. And we built a driveway in there and cut into the hill, and it actually ended up being a really nice site for his home. So yeah. I would say with you there, it looks intimidating on a wood lot, but don't let that disparage you, because we can come in there and take the trees out and clear a nice spot for you. The other one I was thinking of is Mr. so and so down in where was that one? He went out and looked at it with me. I think that one was in Dixon County maybe as well. I can't remember. Anyways, he built like this nice little, I think it was a 34 by 64. Had a nice shop area for his camper, and then a little living space in it. And it was just a 15-acre wooded lot, and it looked pretty uninhabitable when we looked at it, but it's a really pretty spot. It's right next to this kind of a drop-off. He's got a nice view, so yeah, that's a great way to go. And I think when I would have started, if someone would take me out to a wooded lot, I would just be thinking, oh no, this is terrible.
Yeah,
but it's actually not. It works really good.
Yeah, very doable. If you get the right, I mean, either us or another professional excavator out there, land clearing guys, and have a good plan to go in and lay the trees down, cut it in a driveway, build a pad. Generally speaking, that what would you say we've been seeing that anywhere from 20 to 40,000 in cost to come in and clear a lot?
Yeah,
and of course there's exceptions. Sometimes lower, sometimes it's higher, but that's a good average, I would say, for what we've been dealing with. Usually they're not right off the road. We're cutting in 1,000, 2,000 foot driveway, piling the trees, burying the stumps, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it seems like typically as well, if you can keep from bringing dirt from another area to build up the pad, that's a huge cost savings. And it seems like a lot of these wooded lots we're able to, once we knock the trees down, we're able to work with what we've got and make that work a little bit more than these flat fields where there's they're super sloped or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. So like when you get a building pad done, if you can use what the materials on site versus bringing in 20, 30, 50 loads of clay, that's a huge cost savings for the customer in the long run. Is typically clay around the area we're building in is anywhere from 250 to 500 a load, and you start doing the math at 50 loads, you can run up a significant bill just in cost of bringing in clay. Shifting gears a little bit, talking about, perking. People seem to be very intimidated by that as well. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so when we started today, you mentioned stage one. So whenever I'm going out to a site or I'm talking to a customer, one of the first things I'm going to mention to them is the perk test, because it doesn't really matter what county you're in, how the codes are, how strict they are. If you don't have a perk test, then you're not going to be able to build a home on that site. So that is like the first thing you need to do is get a perk test, and you don't want to disturb the site. You don't want to do much of anything until you've got that done. So that is like step number one in my mind.
Yeah, the sooner you get that process started, and as the homeowner, as a landowner, you can go ahead and get that process started. The sooner you get that, the quicker you're going to get in your house, because some areas there's up to a 6 to 8 week wait period, and if the more you delay that, the more you delay moving into your house down the road.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Another thing I want to bring up is people say to me, I hear people say, well, if it don't perk, what are we going to do? In my experience, I've never had one not perk. And I'm not a septic guy, so I'm speaking from a 30,000 foot view. But it's not a matter of whether it will or won't perk. Very rarely will it not perk. It's just you might need more lateral line, or you might have an above ground system, or you might have to bring in topsoil from another site to make it work. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I would say it's more of where it will perk versus if it will perk. So yeah, a lot of times on certain sites, if we have to bring dirt in, they'll have like a provisional area of where your septic system's going to go, and if that sits below the grade they want it to be, then you're just gonna have to come in and build it up as far as they tell you. I know when Justin built his house, he had to end up bringing 18 loads of dirt in to build it up to put his septic in, just to make it work there. Otherwise, I've had several homes myself where you've had to put a grinder pump in. So if they perk it where you don't want it to be, and say your septic is uphill, you're either going to have to build your house up to where it can actually like percolate down to the septic system, or you're going to have to pump it all the way up the hill. So those are some things to think about with that.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not a septic guy. I'm just speaking from my general knowledge, if you will. But it's about, like in layman's terms, absorption rate for the soil. So how much can it absorb? So that's like, it might be a 200-foot system, like lateral lines, or it might be 700. So it'll probably perk either way, but it might be a little more cost to you to get the amount of lateral line in and all that for you.
Something else I could real quick mention that I just got thinking about is when you're setting up a pad and you're getting someone to do dirt work. We talked a little bit about it, but make sure that you have an accessible driveway to get in and out of the construction site. Because if you just build a pad, if you do your own dirt work, you don't have a gravel lane of some kind, then you're just going to end up getting trucks and everything stuck, and that's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah,
that's something to think about as well in your early stages.
Yeah, you need reasonable ingress, egress for the build site.
Yeah, good rough gravel driveway is great for getting the gravel packed down. By the time you're ready to move in, you can put a layer of 57s or dense grade or something on it, and you got yourself a nice driveway just from running those trucks back and forth. So.
Yes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between conventional build methods and barndominium pole barn build methods. So one thing to keep in mind here at Keystone, when we say barndominium, we do primarily post in-ground pole barns. It's really it's blown up, and there's a lot of people doing it, and there's some guys that do pads, like concrete pads with stick builds on top, and a couple different, like there's the steel method, but what we primarily do is post in-ground. So talk a little bit about, you've built some, standard built, stick built homes on foundations. You do this every day. Like, let's talk a little bit about the differences.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I talked to a customer this week, and they were kind of in the same situation as me, where they've built a few traditional homes. And something she mentioned that actually was a huge issue for them is they just built a traditional home, about a year ago. And just like it often happens on those, you dig your footers, you do your block, put your subfloor down, and sometimes even the framing gets started, but there's no shingles on the roof, it's not dried in, and it tends to sit there for weeks at a time. And so they finished up their home, moved in, and they had a child that ended up getting really sick, like off and on. They just couldn't figure out what it was. And here they figured out that this home, from sitting in construction, had developed mold. And it was all throughout it. And they actually had to move out of their home for 5 months, and they spent $70,000 demolding their home. So that's actually a really cool aspect of post frame.
So 1 second, just to clarify, you're saying they built, they block pier system, and then they do the joist, and they got it all framed, and then it set during probably the winter months or something, and got a lot of rain in it, or spring or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to sit very long. What typically happens is, so like you said, you'll do your footers, you'll put your block in, you do your subfloor, stud walls, OSB plywood on the roof, and sometimes paper, and then at times it'll sit for a couple weeks up to a couple months waiting for a shingle guy.
Sure.
If everyone's got their stuff in order, maybe not. But if a rain comes through, it soaks everything. I've had it happen quite a few times, and so just from that's what was causing issues for them.
Is it primarily the spruce and yellow pine, or is it the OSB and the Vantech top knot, whatever kind of?
I wouldn't say it's not the Vantech. It's the OSB and your floor joists, depending on what you're using. Because I've been underneath plenty of crawl spaces that are new, where you'll see mold spotting starting to happen just because it sits so damply. And when it's damp underneath in the crawl space, that seeps up through your floors, and I feel like that's where it comes from. And then also on your walls, your OSB, and sometimes around your windows and that kind of thing. There's moisture built in there.
Okay, yeah. So that's the conventional build method. Kind of walk us through the process of how we do our concrete and 6 mil and so on and so forth.
So for us, like Jim said, we're primarily posts in the ground. So most of our crews, they would set posts in one day, and typically in the next day or two, they'd be setting trusses and putting metal on that building. And so within the space of a week on a big build, maybe 2 weeks, that building is already dried in, and then the concrete is poured after that. So instead of taking 2 months to get this thing dried in, it's a week or two.
Right.
And you skip that whole step of allowing it to get rained on, everything to get wet. And then the concrete, we put a vapor barrier under that. And it's a 4,000 psi, 4-inch floor, and you also block that. I don't think mold's going to be coming up underneath concrete, so you block that crawl space aspect of it out,
Right.
of mold coming up through there.
And I just want to point out too for our listeners, when we say vapor barrier, it's specifically a 6 mil black plastic, so it stops all moisture from coming up.
That is correct. Now, keep in mind, concrete does take 30 days to cure, so it's going to sweat for a little bit.
You're going to see some water on your windows and or sweat beads on your windows and stuff in the first 30 to 45 days. Good point. But yeah, so I think the point we're trying to make here, guys, is conventional build, whereas it has its benefits, it's a great way to build. I'm not knocking it, but sometimes it can be a slow, drawn-out process to get yourself dried in. Typically, everybody that does that uses a general contractor, where what we're offering is an alternative where we come in, we build the shell quickly, get it under roof, the exterior is complete, and then most of our clients are acting as their own contractor and coming in and finishing it on their timetable. And there's really no rush because it's dried in. We could do our part and it could set for literally years and be just fine, and then you can come in and do what you need to whenever you're ready on your time. And also you get the benefit of saving that general contractor's markup. And it's not for everyone, I understand that, but for the people that do want to save money and build a non-conventional house and save a lot of money, it's an awesome option.
Yeah, again, I'll use myself as an example. My house took several months to get dried in. I had our company build a post frame garage for me, and in 2 days they had it framed and had all the metal on dried in. So
Yeah.
it's that big. It's that big a difference most of the time.
I want to talk a little more about what to look for in your land. So when thinking about if you were out looking for a lot, like, can you name me 2 to 5 things that would be kind of top of your list you'd be looking for if you wanted to build a barndominium slab home?
One of the things would be a reasonably flat spot, even if there's dirt work involved, because I go out with a lot of people especially in Tennessee, and they're like, this is the lot we want to buy, and there's just nowhere good to put the house, and you end up spending a fortune on excavation, that kind of thing. So that's definitely something I would look for. The other thing would be accessibility. What kind of road it's coming from, how far you're going to put your drive back in, the water lines, electrical, overhead lines. I don't know if that counts as a few things, but those are two things
That's
I would
helpful.
look for.
You made me think of something I hadn't thought of earlier. So a lot of these lots, if it's kind of into a steep hill, we can go in and carve out a flat spot, but then you got a big cost in a retaining wall. And a lot of our clients are looking to avoid any big costs. Like, the whole appeal to this is you get to build a new home, custom built, and save money. So, yeah, if you buy a really uneven rocky, another thing to look for is a lot of rock cropping out. That creates a lot of headache. But if you're building retaining walls and you're jackhammering rock out, you're kind of defeating the purpose of the whole build.
Yeah. The other thing I would think of, and this is just, say I was moving to, I didn't have a certain county or a state that I was necessarily locked down in. I would consider codes and per county and kind of where you're at, because that makes a huge difference in barndos.
That's a good point.
Because as a rule, in the last 10 years they've probably gotten real popular, and some of these codes departments are not super familiar with it, and it can be a real pain to build. It seems to be possible everywhere, but it's just maybe a small minor thing I would think about when I'm trying to choose a place or a lot.
I want to interject there. So if you are listening to this and you're wondering where to buy, I have some suggestions. I know Dustin has some around the Tennessee area and the Kentucky area that are great for this. Cheap places to buy land. And also we offer free drawings with everything we build. But if you just want to talk to us about where you want to build and get a set of plans, we also sell plans. So we would love to talk to y'all about that. But moving on, just doing a little quick plug there, but moving on, what are some other things to keep in mind? I know we ran into a couple recently where crossing a creek, and you wouldn't think it would be that big of a deal, but man, I've seen some in Tennessee at least where EPA is getting involved and FEMA, and they're like dictating exactly how the bridge has to be built, and it's like crazy expensive, like $40,000-$50,000 some of these to build a really small concrete bridge over it to pass. I don't know if it's EPA or FEMA, but somebody like that you don't want to cross is getting involved with these creek crossings, and that's something I never would have thought of until I kind of ran into it. So that's something to look for and kind of do some research on ahead of time.
Yeah, it reminds me of one Dexter was talking about where they had an underground gas line, they had an overhead power line, they had property setbacks, and they were trying to put a 40 by 60 right in the middle there. So those are definitely things to think about.
Yeah, no, we actually are doing that one. So that, yeah, it's like, how was it? So the gas line was perpendicular to the building, but the water line was perpendicular, but the gas line was angled, and then the electric lines were like up here angled.
Yeah.
So it just created an odd shape, and it just fits in the setbacks right in the middle of all that.
That's not ideal.
So yeah, that's not ideal, but it was family land, and I understand why he was trying to do it. Save the family farm. So talking a little bit more about our background, I think people want to know why they should listen to us. So let's talk a little bit more before we wrap this up about our experience, who we are a little bit, so on and so forth. So tell us a little more about yourself, Dustin.
Yeah, well, I've heard it said that experience for the sake of experience is usually a bad experience. But in my case, I don't have, like Jim said earlier, I don't have I've got an 8th grade education, but I've been in construction for 18 years now, and you see a lot of things when you've been doing it that long. And so, I think at Keystone, we worked really hard to create a good model of putting building shells up, pouring concrete, and basically getting people dried in. And we do about 200 buildings a year. So I think we've got a lot of experience between the 20 people that work here, so that we can really take care of our customers if they're willing to, come talk to us and listen to us. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was making me think about my background and how long have I actually been, not necessarily in this business, but in the industry. And, when I was 5, Dad was building a house, and then we lived in that house. And then I think when I was 13, 14, we built another house, and, so on and so forth. We were always building something, doing something, and I was right there by his side the whole time. And then I have 7 older brothers who have all been around the industry, and they've all been an influence in my life and taught me little things here and there that I took for granted a lot. But looking back, I was just so immersed in it. It's almost inevitable that I ended up in the construction world, because that's all I knew. Went to 8th grade, Mennonite school, got out, went to work, and it wasn't even a choice I really made. It was just, all right, this is the path you're on, and let's go. But looking back, I'm very thankful for it, because the trades are underappreciated. It's a really, really good lifestyle. You get to be out in nature. You get to be working with people, helping them achieve their dreams. So, I'm very thankful for it. Looking back, the experience I got to have growing up around that, watching Dad and my brothers build, just being immersed in it. It's been really cool looking back, now. So I would say all in, I've had 15 to 20 years experience. It's like, when do you want to start the tape? You know, like,
yeah.
Is it 10 or 15? You know, so
Yeah. So a little bit of history. If you want to go back even further, since I've been out of school, my dad used to work at a cabinet shop, and I spent a lot of time with him there when I was really young, just tinkering around, trying to make stuff, whatnot. And then when we moved to Kentucky in 2000, he was working on a framing crew where they built between 30 and 50 houses a year, just their crew. And I spent a lot of time. It's not really legal, but I spent a lot of time on the job with him there. And learned a lot there. And then as soon as I got out of 8th grade, I went to work with my dad. He'd quit the framing job and was working on poultry equipment, or poultry houses. And those have plumbing, electrical, framing, and concrete. You get all of it. We'd wire up fans and feed lines and all this different stuff, and we'd plumb water lines, and we'd build new houses. And so I got on the job training there, and my dad was also a very driven man, and so you weren't allowed to sit around and mess around. If you did, he's going to yell at you until you get your butt up and get back to work. And so any work ethic I have, which I attribute to my dad, and he's taught me just about everything I know. So that's where my experience and history comes from, except for maybe the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yep. I relate to that. Between my brothers, older brothers, and my dad, got a lot of exposure, and they were very willing to whip up on you if you weren't getting after it like they thought you should.